Dr. Leesa Souto, who is Director of the Marine Resources Council, will be talking to us about the Indian River Lagoon report card and things associated with the health of the Indian River Lagoon. Immediately to her left is Richard Silvestri from the Treasure Coast Progressive Alliance. You're VP, are you not?
Yes.
VP of our sister organization in the Treasure Coast, and he'll be talking about fracking in Florida. To his left, Dr. James Fenton from the Florida Solar Energy Center, very, very knowledgeable man who could talk for hours on this topic. We'll be talking a little bit about solar here in Florida. And last but not least, down on the end is Chris Costello from the Sierra Club of Florida, and she'll be talking about what happened in Tallahassee during this most recent legislative session. So without further ado, Dr. Leesa Souto.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me here again. This is always a great group to come and talk to, so I appreciate the invitation to speak to you again. And I was asked to talk about two projects that MRC is involved with. One is the report card, and the other is a septic tank study, which is sorely needed and finally going to get started. So, Vince, if you would please, or can I? Do you have this?
Yeah. I just switched it for a second. Just push the right arrow wherever you need.
Okay, great. And now I have to. So I'll start with a little introduction about our organization. Marine Resources Council is a charitable organization. We really rely on the community to support us. We've been around since '84, and our mission is all about protecting and restoring that estuary right there, which extends all the way from New Smyrna down to Volusia. So I drive up and down New Smyrna a lot. We're located at the Ted Moorhead Lagoon House. That is not a restaurant. It's actually our little education center. It's open from Tuesday to Saturday. You're welcome from 9 to 5 to come in and take a look around. And our mission is about science restoration, engagement, and citizen participation. One of the projects that we've had going really from the inception of MRC is our Lagoon Watch Citizen Monitoring Program. This is 5 years of data from one of our monitoring stations, one of our citizens located in the area of the fish kill, that very clearly answers the question, what happened? So what you're looking at is dissolved oxygen, and fish of course need oxygen to survive. And it shows where oxygen has plummeted over the last 5 years. It happened 3 times. So this is something that happens regularly, is going to keep happening regularly because we've put enough nutrients in the lagoon to cause these algae blooms to trigger. And then when the algae die, the dissolved oxygen plummets and the fish suffocate, usually in a very short time frame. It would be like if you took 95% of the oxygen out of the room right now, we would just start falling over one by one. So it's a horrific occurrence, but you see right here, oh, does this have, oh, it does. Right here on 3/20, which is the weekend of the fish kill, dissolved oxygen actually went down to 0.8. If you took the average of these 5 years, it's usually about 5.5 milligrams per liter. So it went down to less than 1. And this is in the lagoon proper. This isn't even up in a canal or up in one of the tributaries. This is stunning that the lagoon proper had a DO level that low. So that's what happened. This is going to happen. This is a chronic problem of having a system that's been eutrophied, actually, like overindulged in nutrients. Too much of a good thing. It's overindulged. Whenever something stirs it up, and those ammonia in particular dissolves, then these algae blooms, and particularly brown algae is the critter we're dealing with now, takes off. That's why it was brown for months, and then when the wind died and the algae started to die, we all looked at each other like, uh-oh. DO is going to plummet and the fish are going to start floating. So we're worried that we're going to see a similar trend that we saw 3 years ago with a marine mammal death and so on, but we haven't yet, so keeping our fingers crossed. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the two projects, and I am a strategic planner. MRC is a strategic planning entity from our inception as well. We have been involved in assembling the community in an American assembly process. It's a process that was developed by the Eisenhower administration to ensure adequate representation and discussion of equal representation is in the room, and you make decisions based on consensus building. We did 13 American assemblies before I started at MRC in 2013. When I got there and the lagoon was in this tragic condition, I said we need to assemble again. So we held an American assembly in May of 2014. Thank you all. Everybody here was represented. We got 100 people representing the community in a room. Many of your representatives are here as well. And we reached consensus on 114 priority actions. The top 5 are summarized here. They're kind of no-brainers, from what you read in the newspaper now. Lagoon-wide education, Indian River Lagoon report card, now I'm going to talk about that one. Muck management, which is more than just removing it. Septic tank plan, and a stormwater management. And I'm going to talk about these three right here. The first is this priority number 1, lagoon-wide education. MRC launched this last year. It's called Be Floridian Now. The website is Be Floridian Now. It talks to you about not using fertilizer on your lawn and what you can do instead. So in some cases, if you don't fertilize your lawn, you need to put alternatives instead because the grass will not thrive without fertilizer. In many cases, your grass will be just fine. But there are alternatives out there. There are products you can apply. All the ordinances, we passed 44 ordinances in this 5-county area, 2013 and 14. If you want to know about your ordinances, and thank you all in the room who helped pass those ordinances, they're out there as well. So this is all about fertilizer use and getting educated on what your ordinances are and what alternatives to fertilizer exist. And if you're thinking about banning fertilizer or not applying fertilizer at all, try it out. I don't know what's so scary about that. So let's just not apply any fertilizer as far as I'm concerned. Priority number 2 is the Indian River Lagoon report card. This one took a little bit longer to get started. But the underlying premise is we really can't manage what we don't have the data to manage from. We need a plan. We need to understand the complexity of a very diverse system. We need to assemble all of the scientific data, of which there's plenty, in one place and start looking at the system and its complexity and evaluating it over time. So first thing we're going to need to do is assemble the data to see this big picture. Then we need to identify the targets. What are our grades going to be and what are the benchmarks going to be for those grades? Prioritize management strategies based on those, and then demonstrate success. So once we have evaluable criteria, we can start demonstrating that we're reaching the measures that we want to reach. Right now, we don't even have them. One of the other important features of the report card is it keeps the community engaged in the long run. This might take 5 or 10 years. So we need to update you all regularly every year on what's happening. Are we getting better or worse? I don't know how many people have been asked that question, but I get asked it almost every day. And what is being done to improve the situation? Is what we're doing working? What does it look like? There have been at least 25 done worldwide, so we have examples to learn from. We have to define indicators, grading scales, benchmarks, do all of these different kinds of things. I'm going to go a little bit fast because I'm just going to pull that card up any second and be like, yeah, 5 minutes now. So indicators are things like these. Chlorophyll levels, which is like a measure of the amount of algae in the water column. Filter feeder populations, because filter feeders are taking up things like algae and eating them. Seagrass coverage, nutrient levels, fecal coliform bacteria, fish populations. These are examples of what indicators might be. But we need to have adequate data coverage because we're talking about a 156-mile-long system. So if we're going to grade the system, we need to make sure we have the data on all of the indicators to establish enough data density to do the analysis that needs to get done. There are examples of grading scales that have been done in other places. You can establish a grading scale that goes from A to F. You can use coloration. You can have a trend that just shows a line or a number scale, so you see a gradient of good to bad, or things getting better or worse. And then mapping. So we would like to map and show graphically how the condition of the lagoon is. So these are examples of different types of maps. They can either be spatially kind of colored in like this, or we can go with points like this. These are different methods that other people have used. The steps to completing the report card. The report card in year 1 costs about $189,000. We've got $70,000 that we're projecting to get from family foundations. We keep saying this thing needs to get funded by the public, so we're trying to do this through local fundraising. $64,000 in community donations, that's everybody. And then $50,000 from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program has been requested. So on tomorrow morning at their meeting, they're going to entertain that. So if you're not doing anything later tonight, send the IRL Council a little note, a little email, and say, please fund the report card. They'll be looking at that tomorrow. We went ahead and started the process with a small grant we got from a local family foundation. We held the Indian River Lagoon Science Assembly at the Lagoon House in January 21st and 22nd. We had 51 scientists and advisors in the room to start to come up with what those indicators of health would be and where the data are. They came up with the 5 reporting regions. They decided to use the existing management regions that were defined by the basin management action plans that were in place, plus Mosquito Lagoon, which is probably going to have a basin management action plan coming. We divided up into groups. We had people divide up into groups and talk more specifically about 4 different types of indicators. The first would be water quality. That's working people. Water quality indicators that they came up with were not dissimilar from those that others have used. Physical conditions, nutrients, toxins, algal blooms, and muck. And there were others. Oops, I don't know what just happened. Second group was called the Habitat and Benthic group, and they came up with these indicators of health, and they started to figure out where the data sources were. They actually went to the next level. Oyster reef coverage, seagrass coverage, coastal wetlands, and other indicators of health. And then the wildlife group, they were initially called the iconic species group, but they rebelled against that name. Said, we will not be the iconic species. We represent all wildlife. So so these are their thresholds and their data sources, and they decided dolphin, manatee, sea turtles, and diving birds were their indicators. And I'm not going to talk about the discussion, but I can address questions you have about how they came up with those, because I don't think I'm going to have time. The fourth group was the fish and shellfish, and the indicators that they came up with were biodiversity, key fish species, shellfish, coverage, and tropical peripheral species, which are that are unique to our area. So they thought those were certain species that were important to demonstrate the health of the system. The next steps are, we're about to produce a product that came out of this session and define, what has been agreed upon in terms of indicators. It'll end up looking like a print product, and it'll be on our website, probably in May. And that this science advisory team is formed, and they've committed to continue to move forward. So they're going to continue to provide the data, help us do the analysis, establish the benchmarks, and all of those different steps that we talked about. Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute at FAU, Florida Institute of Technology, the counties and their expertise and data that they have. We need to do a design scheme for the report card itself, and then start the PR planning and public communications messaging. So, one of the first big fundraisers that we're having for this is May 21st at the Lagoon House. We've got George Clinton and a whole bunch of great bands here, Zach Deputy, Trey Pierce and the T-Stone Band, Beebs and our Moneymakers, Thomas Wynn, The Believers, Bastard Sons, Acoustic, and 23 Trees and General Eyes playing at the Lagoon House on the 21st. Tickets are on sale now. They're only $22 a person. I think there's some radio stations that are giving them away, so if you keep listening to 107.1, you might get some for free. And we are seeking sponsors still and vendors. If you're interested in having a table at the event, all the money, all the proceeds generated from the event are going to MRC specifically for the report card. We need $45,000 still that hasn't been promised or kind of fulfilled by potential sponsors, and that's where we're hoping to get it with this event. That's the website, mrclagoonfest.com. And it's a great website too. Okay, priority number 4. So we've done 1, 2, 3 is kind of out of our domain, and number 4 is the septic tank study. And this is what came out of the action assembly, is that we needed to map the septic tanks. I was just talking to somebody today who was exasperated at the fact that we don't even know where the septic tanks are in this entire swath of the lagoon. Like, we're estimating they're somewhere around 300,000, but we're not sure. So that's important. We need to map, figure out where they are, figure out how old they are, figure out if people know that they have one, are they maintaining it, and then also kind of overlay that information with the geologic information of where's the depth of groundwater, are these septic tanks sitting in groundwater, is there adequate soil to deal with the leachate of nitrogen that's coming out of septic tanks, which are by design leaching nitrogen. And the idea is that the soil is supposed to break the nitrogen down if there is soil. If there's sand, they're probably not breaking down your septic tank leachate. So to try to prioritize the areas where septic tanks are likely to be causing the biggest problem through a model, and then go out and ground truth that with citizen scientists. And then back up the citizen scientist data with some wells and doing some laboratory analysis. So we're looking for nutrients. We're going to have to look for other things that are indicative of wastewater so we can distinguish what we're seeing as nutrients from other sources of nutrients. And we're going to be focusing in Brevard County initially with the hopes that we can expand the study throughout the lagoon. So we're very fortunate to have a partner at Brevard who put in a legislative request and got it funded this year and last year. So, I just described all this. So we're hoping that we can analyze with the full study, 200 to 400 groundwater samples, create a priority map so that the county will know where to address the issue first, So we'll have a priority map, an aerial map, and then start recommending the strategies. So for example, if it's an area that we determined to be a priority area that already has a wastewater treatment plant close by, their strategy might be try to get lines to them and hook them up. If it's an area where there's not a wastewater treatment plant, then another strategy might be more appropriate, like upgrading the system or creating, which I can't think of one single good system in a bad situation, a bad location. Even the best system is not going to work. So there may be other priorities or other strategies that can be implemented. And then how do you fund that? Okay, so the study got funded this year thanks to the efforts of Brevard County at $100,000, and we're going to use that money to look at a small area along Turkey Creek and really test a model. So we're going to use that to test a few ideas that we have that we can take lagoon-wide. And then next year, we got $1 million from the legislature this year, so they're not all bad. They gave us $1 million to do the study. We're going to take what we learned from Turkey Creek and extend it and do the full study, do the entire Brevard County. And we really are hoping, we're already starting that conversation with the adjacent counties on if what we do in Brevard, hopefully will lay the groundwork that we can extend to the other counties. This is a project that needs to be done along the entire lagoon. And I actually did it within my time frame. So thank you for inviting me again. Thanks for all that you do for the lagoon. And I guess I can take a question.
Yes, one question right now, if we would, and then we're going to move to our next speaker.
Yes, I asked you before if I could possibly lay down question. You said no. You said ask me, please, if the citizens of Brevard can pass an ordinance.
What a great question, Marty. Thank you for asking that. So it turns out that if the citizens were not happy with the county commission taking action or not taking action, that the Brevard County Charter allows citizens to write their own ordinances and get their own ordinances passed. So it would require it to go on the ballot, and you would have to go through the process of getting signatures and getting an ordinance on the ballot, but it could be done and it is allowed per the county charter. So thank you for that genius question.
I forgot to mention the program for this evening. Basically, we're going to have each speaker, we'll do one question, next speaker, one question, each speaker, one question, and then we'll open the floor and we'll have our Q&A afterward. Richard Silvestri, where did he go? He was...